Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shuffle Music Reviews and Retrospectives from a Gracelessly Aging Millennial. My name is Keaton, here today to count down the studio albums ranked by Americana great Lucinda Williams. I reviewed Lucinda Williams' most recent album, World Gone Wrong, about a month ago and got a lot of good responses to that video and a lot of commenters, especially commenters who I recognize from the Due Dissidence channel, talk about how they love Lucinda Williams and thanking me for that review. And I had already been familiar with a little more than half of her discography, and so I figured it wouldn't be too much of a lift to sort of go through, listen to the rest of it, sit with it for a bit, and then do an album ranking. And I noticed there aren't many album rankings for Lucinda Williams out there on the internet, so I figured why not make one? Certainly a great artist, three-time Grammy Award winner, often branded the Queen of Americana music. She was long rejected by record labels for being a little too rock and roll for the country scene and a little too country for the rock and roll scene. And so while obviously the term Americana goes back more than 100 years in terms of American music, she really popularized it as a pop genre. She really carved out a space for what we consider now to be the Americana music scene. And so a very important, very consequential artist, terrific artist with a ton of great stuff to her name. She is the son of poet and academic, now late poet and academic, Miller Williams, who has influenced her songwriting throughout her career. One of her albums was written in direct response to his passing. Because of her father's teaching career, Lucinda Williams kind of grew up all over the place, traveled a lot as a kid, and those experiences do reflect in the songs. She got her start playing coffee houses and bars around Texas and in New York City, and that sort of barroom band jukebox joint kind of feel has defined almost all of her recorded music career. So without further ado, we're going to get right in and rank her albums from worst to best. Just a couple of ground rules here. She has a bunch of stuff out that we're not counting in the rankings. So she has a series out called Lou's Jukebox, where she covers different artists, pays homage to different genres. These are cover albums. You can see she has a Christmas album. She has a tribute album to Tom Petty, a tribute album to the Beatles. She did one for Southern music, one for Bob Dylan. We're not going to count these because they are cover albums, so we can't count cover albums in the ranking. And also her debut album, let me talk about this one first. She also re-recorded her 1992 album, Sweet Old World. In 2017, she re-recorded that for reasons that we'll get into in the ranking. So we're not going to count that since it's a re-recording of an already released album. And now we're going to talk about her debut a little bit, Rambling on My Mind. This is a really good album put out by Folkways Records. This is also an album of old blues and country covers from artists like Hank Williams, Robert Johnson, and Leadbelly. Doesn't really work to rank a cover album alongside originals. And so just want to make mention of this so you know I did not forget it. A lot of people really like this album. I do as well. There's just no place to really fairly rank it among albums of originals. So we got 14 studio albums that we are going to be ranking. These are albums of original work with a cover sprinkled in here and there, of course. But obviously, the bulk of what we're going to be counting is her original catalog and the discography. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start at the bottom at number 14. I want to be clear before we get started. Just because an album ranks near the bottom doesn't mean it's bad. I don't think Lucinda Williams has a bad album to her name. So these pretty much start out in 3-star territory, I would say. I don't have each of these rated in terms of star rankings, but none of these albums are bad by any stretch. So if one of your favorites comes up toward the bottom, don't hate me too much. But my number 14 pick is 2011's Blessed. This one is kind of her in between record. It's sort of a bridge between her golden era, starting with Car Wheels on a Gravel Road in 1998, and her Highway 20 Records era, which is her own label that she would found and inaugurate with the album that came after this one in 2014. This does kind of feel like a transition record, kind of feels like her least inspired album. She brings in Elvis Costello on guitar for a track called Seeing Black. Matthew Sweet sings some backing vocals on the album. I do like the first three tracks, Buttercup, I Don't Know How You're Living, and especially Copenhagen. I think that is a really good song and kind of a different kind of song for her. That's a really pretty song. But beyond that, there's just not much that jumps out at me here, not much that keeps me coming back to this one. So I like the first three tracks. It's not bad, but this is, I think, her most forgettable effort in her catalog. All right, now number 13 is going to be a bit of a controversial choice for the diehards. It is her Highway 20 Records debut, Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone. This was released in 2014 as her 11th studio album. The first, as I said, on her newly founded label, Highway 20 Records. Now, it's a double album. It's 20 tracks. Got a great opening track, Compassion, which is a musical adaptation of a poem by her father, Miller Williams. Protection, track 2, is really great, too. I really like the first disc on this album. Stand Right By Each Other is another really cool song. Love the backing vocals on that. She brings in a great roster of musicians for this one, including Bill Frisell, jazz great Greg Leiss, and Tony Joe White. It's good. The problem with this is it's just too long. It's way too long. It's an hour and 43 minutes long. This is like watching a movie, this album. And much of the second disc didn't really need to be there. This could have been 13 tracks, 1 hour, which is about standard fare for a Lucinda Williams album, and it wouldn't have been any worse for it. In fact, I'd have probably ranked it higher since there is quite a bit of good stuff here. And like I said, still a good album, still not bad by any means. But Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone is a double album. You can tell she put this out because she was doing this on her indie label, where she was then unconstrained by the pressures of having to conform to a record label's expectations. It allowed her to do a 20-song, hour and 43-minute album. Just because you can do something doesn't always mean that you should. Sometimes less is more. So I do think this album suffers from length. It is a long sit if you listen all the way through. So good stuff on here, just not as dense as it could be given the onerous 100-plus minute runtime. So that's Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone, ranked at number 13. Number 12 is kind of her memoir album here, Stories from a Rock and Roll Heart. So after suffering a stroke in 2020, this was her comeback album, as made clear by the opener, Let's Get the Band Back Together. Bruce Springsteen and Patti Scialfa back her up on a couple of these tracks, Rock and Roll Heart and New York Comeback, which was the single off of this album, the big single here. The album is a charming, feel-good album. Definitely feel more of that anthemic arena rock style here, characteristic of a Springsteen record on some of these tunes. A stylistic departure from her so-called sort of Delta Noir sound of the 2010s. Cool album, new and different sound for her that reflects her personal resilience after her stroke. It's not super memorable beyond that, but definitely a worthy installment to the catalog. So that's Stories from a Rock and Roll Heart at number 12. Number 11 is the new one, World's Gone Wrong. This is her latest album, which came out this January. This is her second anti-Trump protest album. I reviewed this more thoroughly in its own video, of course. I gave it 3 stars. That still feels right. Stuff here that works. I like the title track, which is the opener. I also like the closing track with Norah Jones on piano, We've Come Too Far to Turn Around. Punchline is also really good. The Bob Marley cover, So Much Trouble in the World, with Mavis Staple, is kind of a miss. So this is a mixed bag, but not bad by any means. Musically, pretty good. Voice sounds pretty good. Pretty damn good for now 73. I guess she was 72 when she recorded this. So not a bad album by any means. That's World's Gone Wrong at number 11. All right, number 10 is 2016's Ghost of Highway 20. This is probably her biggest missed opportunity of her career. She brings back Bill Frisell and Greg Leiss here on guitar, and the playing on this album and the production are both fantastic. It might even be her best sounding album she ever released. The guitar work here is really interesting. I love the production. I love the sort of moody, atmospheric tone of a lot of these songs. The songs here are also very personal and heartfelt. This was written after the passing of her father. But like Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone, this is a double album, little shorter than that, but it's still 86 minutes. It's still too long. It's still kind of a chore at times, particularly tracks like Louisiana Story, which is a perfectly good song, but there's absolutely no reason that that should be 9 minutes long. The tempo is just way too slow. It drags, it plods along. At times, this album feels very self-indulgent and probably suffers from the same lack of constraint that Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone did. This is her own label, so she can do whatever she wants. And, at a certain point, you got to say, well, I guess by this time in her career, she earned the right to be a little self-indulgent. But it doesn't really help the work, in my opinion. I think if this album were a little tighter, it could have ranked significantly higher. But as is, it's still one of her best sounding albums, and there's still a lot to recommend it. So once again, folks, none of these are bad. We're talking about good to better to best. So Ghost of Highway 20, still a very good album, but there are a couple skips here because it's just too long. All right, number 9 is my How Dare You pick. I feel like every one of these lists has a how dare you pick where the diehards are going to say, how dare you rank this album this low? But my number 9 is 2001's Essence, and this was her follow-up to the iconic Car Wheels on a Gravel Road record. This is probably the boldest pivot of her career, whereas Car Wheels was this rousing sort of country rock album with lots of upbeat, radio-friendly tunes. This album is really just a minimalist, ghostly whisper of a record. It's very stripped down. It's very slow. It's very quiet. And honestly, that gamble is only partially successful. I mean, there are very strong songs on here. The opener, Lonely Girls, Blue, Bus to Baton Rouge is really good. But I feel like the album is too saturated with these very slow, quiet numbers that just kind of drone on and go nowhere. The writing is good, of course, as it always is. The performances are good, but there's just no momentum to it. The only real exception here is Get Right With God, which is kind of a snappy, bluesy rock number, and that actually won her a Grammy for female rock vocal performance. But other than that, I think this album has some really good stuff on it. As a whole, though, it's just frustratingly slow. I think it needed at least 2 or 3 more up-tempo numbers to kind of keep things interesting and scatter throughout the record, just to give it some forward momentum. Instead, you have an album here that kind of works in small doses, but is a bit of a slog from front to back if you were to just listen to this, no skips. Of course, if you're in the mood for it, it's a nice mellow vibe, but I think this is missing a little punch, missing a little oomph, especially as a follow-up to a massive hit like Car Wheels on the Gravel Road. You'd think you'd want to follow up with something a little livelier than this. But like I said, still good, still has a lot of stuff on it worth listening to, but it's just a little too mellow and too slow for its own good. Our next album on the list is 2020's Good Souls and Better Angels. This is her first anti-Trump protest album. And I think this one is definitely helped by the fact that it comes on the heels of those 2 very long, introspective, and yes, self-indulgent double albums that I talked about earlier on the list, Spirit Meets the Bone and Ghost of Highway 20. This is leaner, meaner, and much more accessible. You Can't Rule Me, kind of a brash, crunchy opener. Waking Up has that acerbic, sort of ferocious attitude in both the vocal and the instrumental arrangement. So does Bone of Contention. You also get some Lucinda-esque blues rockers here, like Down Past the Bottom and Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And then Shadows of Doubt, which is a really good ballad. So generally here, you have a really good blues rock album with a political edge, boosted by the fact that it's kind of a return to form after a long slog of kind of frustratingly slow and lengthy albums. This one has much more of a forward momentum to it. It's much livelier, it's much punchier, and I think this was a very, very welcome return to the sort of blues rock barroom jukebox joint kind of rollicking sound that made her really take off in the late 90s into the 2000s. All right, moving right along here. Number 7 is Little Honey. This is probably the one that I have ranked particularly high on the list next to a lot of diehard fans. I kind of call this her Proof of Life album because this was released just 1 year after an album called West. So this was released in 2008. Now, West is a profoundly dark, tragic, and even angry album, which we're going to talk about later on. This one is fun, upbeat, rollicking, and happy. This is kind of her way of saying, don't worry, I'm okay. It's among her least profound albums, and it was kind of criticized as such. It's not nearly as artistic, quote unquote, as much of her best work, but it is a lot of fun, and I think it works really well. Honeybee is a great song. Real Love is a great song. And even though this is much lighter than her previous 3 efforts, you still do get some great ballads. If Wishes Were Horses, I think, is a really, really terrific song on here. So there are some moments of indulgence. Rarity at almost 9 minutes is too long. But this one is great casual listening. It's the easiest of her albums to just kind of put on in the background. It has enough pulse and is less reliant on the lyrics. In other words, you don't necessarily have to sit with all of these songs and analyze them in real time and contemplate them in real time. This is sort of deliberately light and easy, and on its own terms, I think it works really well. I think it's really fun, and this is sort of a great album to sort of cook dinner to or drive along to on a summer day. So Little Honey from 2008 is my number 7. All right, now we're getting into the real cream of the crop here. So number 6 is 1992's Sweet Old World. This is a really unique album in her catalog. The writing here is terrific. It's outstanding. The subject matter is very mature, very dark. 2 songs here, Pineola and the title track, are directly about self-deletion, shall we say, on YouTube. They're both great songs. 6 Blocks Away, Little Angel, Little Brother, lots of great stuff here. This does, though, the reason I have it ranked as low as I do is because this stands out in her catalog as being the most generic sounding album she ever recorded. It has a very of its time sort of 90s pop rock sound, especially the drum sound. The production here is kind of dry and kind of boring. There's one track on here called Hot Blood, which is sonically very interesting. I love what she does with her voice on that track, and I also love how the guitar solo sort of mimics her vocal technique. But aside from that, the album has a very generic sound, both in terms of the playing and the production. Not bad, just generic. And apparently, Lucinda felt that way as well, which is why she re-recorded this album in 2017 to sound more like her other works, which have that signature wet, swampy barroom band kind of a feel. So from a songwriting standpoint, this is excellent. The sound is very ordinary, which is why she re-recorded it. So it ranks toward the top of the catalog on the strength of the writing. But sonically, it's probably her least compelling album in the catalog. So when you factor all that in, that ranks at number 6. Still a terrific album, solidly 3.5 to maybe even 4 stars. I could go on this one. A very, very strong record nonetheless. All right, now we're getting really into the nitty gritty. Number 5 is her self-titled album from 1988, pardon me. This is often mistaken for her debut album. This was released on Rough Trade Records in 1988. After years of her being rejected by American labels for being too rock and roll for country and too country for rock and roll. This album kind of birthed what we now call the Americana genre in pop music. Great collection of songs here. Passionate Kisses, I Just Want to See You So Bad, Change the Locks is great. Crescent City is a great Cajun tribute to New Orleans. I love the vocal melody on that, the harmony, the fiddle. That's just kind of a perfect song. This is a great statement maker of an album, really the launching pad for a great career, though not her debut album. Her debut album was that cover album, Ramblin' on My Mind, in 1979. And the following year, in 1980, she came out with an album which is my number 4 pick. One of the most underrated albums ever, in my opinion. This is Happy Woman Blues. This was released in 1980, 8 years before that self-titled album that we just talked about for Rough Trade. This was put out by Folkways label, which would become Smithsonian Folkways in 1987. And that's a not-for-profit label. And so this album kind of sounds like it was made on a budget, because it was, but the sound is perfectly clear here, so it doesn't really bother me at all. The songwriting here is just stellar. Absolutely stellar. Lafayette was a great opener. I Lost It is performed here as sort of an up-tempo, line-dancing kind of country tune here, in contrast to the re-recorded version on Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. Just a terrific song with a timeless quality. A lot of the songs on here feel like they can be Hank Williams songs. They just have this sort of timeless, classic, kind of great American songbook quality to them, particularly King of Hearts, the chorus there, love is a gamble, I knew it from the start. Whoever's holding the cards, please deal me the King of Hearts. That's classic stuff. I mean, that could be a Hank Williams tune. Just a terrific batch of country songs here, performed in classic roots music style. This definitely has the most country sound of any of her albums, but was apparently not country enough to land her a deal in Nashville. She would play the bar circuit for 8 more years before breaking through in a major way after this album. But this album deserves tons more credit than it got at the time, and that it gets to this day. This really belongs in the upper tier of the Lucinda Williams catalog. To me, this is one of the most underrated albums ever. So do yourself a favor and give it a listen if you missed it. I think it's really outstanding. All right, so now we're in real cream of the crop territory. Now we're in 4 to 4.5 to even 5-star territory here as we enter the top 4. I would count this easily a 4-star album here, Happy Woman Blues. And number 3, moving right along, is 2007's West. Now, this is perhaps her most polarizing album in her entire catalog. It's not only her darkest album, it's one of the darkest albums of its kind by any artist ever. Written and recorded in the wake of both the tumultuous breakup and the death of her mother, feelings of loss and despair are punctuated by outbursts of rage and fury and resentment. It's a relentlessly and unflinchingly dark and stormy album, but I think the songs here are among her best. Are You All Right is just a beautiful song where she's checking in on an old flame, asking if he has someone to hang out with. Do you have someone to hug and kiss you? Just a beautiful melody, really sad but tender lyrics. Mama You Sweet is obviously about her late mother. Another just gut-wrenchingly sad song, but a beautiful song. Learning How to Live is about moving on from the bad breakup. Fancy Funeral, again, fairly straightforward, the meaning there. Unsuffer Me, another tortured song, but a great one. Rescue is probably the highlight here for me. The guitar on that track is just so moody and atmospheric. The production is so perfect, and the melody is so good. She's got Bill Frisell, the jazz great, playing on this album as well. Really beautiful vocal on that song. Great lyrics. This is an album where everything comes together. The lyrics, the vocal performance, the playing, and the production to create the exact mood she was going for. It's consistently great. There's no skips here. Just a terrific album from start to finish. Like I said, one of the more polarizing ones, since it is kind of relentlessly down in mood, but can't deny the quality here. 2007's West is outstanding at number 3. At number 2, we have 2003's World Without Tears. World Without Tears is simply a great collection of songs, some of her most emotional material to date. at the time it was recorded. I'd argue West is even rawer than this, but that came after. This one really builds on the minimalism of 2001's Essence to sort of capture that raw live in studio sound of her touring band. The songs here are more raucous, the music sort of grimier and scuzzier. You have the carnal, really dirty, really sort of overtly sexual blues rocker Righteously, which earned her a Grammy nomination. Great vocal performance there. You also have Real Live Bleeding Fingers and Broken Guitar Strings, another just raw, rockin' track. But then you have quieter moments like Fruits of My Labor, which is great. Overtime, again, like King of Hearts on Happy Woman Blues, Overtime just has a classic sound to it, right out of the American songbook. Again, that feels like that could be, Dolly Parton, Hank Williams. It's just got a timeless quality about it, that song. You feel like you're listening to a song that could be 100 years old. Those 3 Days, a great song about a brief love affair, terrific melody, terrific vocal phrasing. But the best song on here, though, is probably, for my money, Minneapolis. Just a really painful lyrics here, but a great mid-tempo groove and an outstanding, quirky, well-constructed melody. Not much to say about this album then, other than it's just a terrific collection of songs. Sometimes it's just a matter of luck. Do you write a bunch of great stuff all at the same time to make for a classic album? In this case, she did. So World Without Tears from 2003 probably should have been her follow-up to Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. I think it would have suited her career probably a little better if this were the follow-up rather than Essence, because this really feels like building on Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. You recreate a lot of that rock sound that was missing on Essence. So this may have come 2 years too late, but we're glad it arrived. It's a classic. It's outstanding. And it would be her number one if not for the undisputed GOAT of her catalog. Number one, of course, is 1998's Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. This is the masterpiece. There's no denying it. This is the definitive Americana album. Winner of the Grammy for Best Folk Performance. This was Lucinda's first album since 1992's Sweet Old World. So there was a 6-year gap between releases. And it wasn't because she was taking time off. She toured with Mary Chapin Carpenter, who recorded a cover of Passionate Kisses, which is off the 1988 self-titled album. And other artists started covering her songs, and she became an even bigger star than she was when Sweet Old World came out. So there was a lot of anticipation for her next album, and she's definitely felt the pressure. So she spent years recording this, starting in 1995 with sessions that she almost entirely scrapped. She brought in Steve Earle to co-produce the tracks she wanted to re-record, and the final product was finally released in 1998. This is the debut of what would be her signature live in studio barroom band kind of jukebox joint kind of sound moving forward throughout her career. And the batch of songs is just outstanding. This is far from her only great batch of songs, but what makes this album the standout of the catalog is the diversity of the songs. She generally has a formula that she kind of sticks to throughout her career. You basically get a few different varieties of song here. You get mid-tempo ballads, slow waltzes, sort of slower blues stompers, and then the up-tempo blues kind of rockers. But on this, you have songs that are more poppy, like Right in Time, which is track 1. Roots rockers, like the title track, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, which is a terrific song. Can't Let Go, which is a cover by a mostly unknown artist who she made popular with that single. Mellower country rock tunes like Too Cool to Be Forgotten. Just going down the list here, if you look at the track list, Right in Time, Car Wheels, Too Cool, Drunken Angel, great. Concrete and Barbed Wires, great. Lake Charles, Can't Let Go, I Lost It, which is a re-recording from her 1980 album, done as a more plaintive sort of mid-tempo piece here. The whole album is simply classic. Just a great batch of genre-bending roots rock Americana that's now the gold standard for albums of its kind, for good reason. This is the definitive Americana rock record. Everything gets weighed against this one for good reason. It is simply classic, 5 stars without a doubt for Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. No doubt about that. So that is the album ranking, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. We'll go down here just for a recap. At number 14, we got 2011's Blessed. At number 13, 2014's Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone. At number 12, 2023, Story from a Rock and Roll Heart. World's Gone Wrong, her new one. January 2026 release at number 11. 2016's Ghost of Highway 20 at number 10. 2001's Essence at number 9. Good Souls, Better Angels, the 2020 Protest album at number 8. Little Honey, 2008 at number 7. 1992's Sweet Old World at number 6. Her self-titled 1988 album, Lucinda Williams, at number 5. Happy Woman Blues, the criminally underrated country album, at number 4, recorded way back in 1980, 46 years ago, if you can believe that. That's number 4. At number 3, you have the dark and stormy but beautiful West from 2007. Number 2, you got World Without Tears from 2003. And number 1, the classic 1998, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. So it's always fun to get to go through the discography of a great artist and sort of sit with the material for a little while and think about it and organize your thoughts this way. It's really fun. That's why these album rankings are as popular as they are. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I did one for the Stone Temple Pilots when I first started the channel. That's a shorter one since they only had 8 studio albums as a band and only 6 with Scott Weiland, so you can go and check that one out if you'd like. And we'll do more of these. I'm definitely going to do one for The Cure pretty soon, since my album of the year rankings have sort of encompassed a lot of the meat of their career from the mid to late 80s into the early 90s. So that'll probably be the next artist that I profile like this. But hope you all enjoyed this one. If you did, smash that like button. If you didn't, smash that like button anyway. You must have enjoyed it a little bit if you're still watching a half hour in. And smash that subscribe button. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.